Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome to it's not Tuesday, it's Wednesday already. Ooh, short week. Short week. Um, so welcome. If you're in Vancouver, you'll see that it's raining pretty significantly outside, but that's okay. This is kind of more like our winter weather, not like we had a couple weeks ago. All that snow was kind of not typical for us. This is kind of a little more common. Um, and it'll probably rain for another couple months before we see spring, but then it'll be glorious and beautiful. How'd the rest of day one go?
Yeah, pretty good.
Okay, no problem. Is anyone here in a UT class, or are you guys just in secondary?
Just
Just secondary? Yeah. So you don't have to go online or eventually go across the street or anything? Yeah. Okay, just checking. Let me see. Shh. Is there anything I forgot to mention yesterday? I don't think there is. Any questions come up since yesterday that you want to ask, or should we just dive right in? Dive?
yeah,
What's that?
just that, right?
Dive in? Okay, I like the way you think. Jen, let's do it. Okay. So, I should say good morning to Anna. Anna's here. Good morning to you. All right. So the first thing that we'll talk about here with social justice is kind of the base point, right? So the kind of assumptions that we're making, the kind of theoretical framework that we're kind of operating under, and usually you have to kind of establish this to understand anything else, right? You have to kind of understand how you're approaching something, right? So all disciplines have this. They have some kind of theory behind them, or things that they believe to be true, or approaches that they feel are useful. And so we'll kind of do the same thing. We're just going to stay on the surface of this because this whole kind of theoretical background can become very complicated and difficult to deal with. So we're just going to look at the very surface of it, but still there's some things here that are useful to understand and to talk about. And if we have time later, and if the class is kind of going well, we can dig into that theoretical framework a little more, but we'll see how it goes. Okay. So first off, what social justice is, why we should care about it, and how we can understand it. Okay, those are kind of our three questions for the moment. If I asked you, and I think I will ask you, what would you say social justice is? How would you define it to me? That all people are equal? Okay, that's definitely a part of it for sure. What else would you say about it?
Or the environment,
It's like an environment around us?
social and justice. I don't know how to describe it.
Okay, well let's okay, so social is kind of the social environment, right? The people around us, that's part of it. How would we define justice?
If people in society are truly equal, whatever individual is there,
Okay.
or what we do.
Yeah, so you're kind of recognizing that people need to be treated as equal, right? Regardless of race or religion or any kind of other difference, right? Yeah, that's good. That's good. What else could we say?
Pretty much that.
That's pretty much well, you're right. That is most of what we're talking about. Okay, that is most of what we're talking about. So, yeah, if we're if we're engaged in social justice, or if we're learning about social justice, we're kind of approaching things based on a few beliefs, okay? And so if we're interested in social justice, then we believe that all people in society need to have access to the same rights and resources, right? So again, this doesn't necessarily mean that everyone gets exactly the same thing, right? Doesn't mean that everyone has exactly the same amount. It just means that everybody has access, right? People have opportunities, right? They might not be able to get into college, but they can try to, right? They can write a, come on in, hello, come on in. They can write an exam, right? They can apply for funding. They can try, right? So it doesn't mean everything is necessarily equal, but it means that people have access to things, right? And again, some things are, should be provided to people universally, and maybe some things not, right? And as a society, we can decide on how we want to divide up resources, right? But if we believe in social justice, we believe that people deserve to have access to rights, certain rights and resources, right? We also believe in human rights, right? And so human rights, there's kind of a long list. Well, it's not that long. There's a list of them, right? But the basic idea behind human rights is that you deserve things just because you're a human being, right? There are things that you should be provided with. There is a level of treatment that you should get simply because you're a human being, right? You don't have to earn those things. You deserve them just because you're a human, right? And for the most part, they can't be taken away, right? They belong to you just for being a human. And as part of that, we believe that in talking about social justice, we believe that we should spread out society's resources as equally as we possibly can, right? And I think most of us probably, I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but good morning. I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but do you think we could ever live in a perfectly equal society? Where everyone was perfectly equal? No? Hard? Why do you think that would be hard?
I think we can, but it's a hard process.
Right. Right? Yeah. What do you think? Could we ever live in a society where everything was perfectly equal? Or would we? Sorry, go ahead.
Maybe it's impossible in some points because other people are racist and so on, and it's very hard to choose them out. So maybe sometimes
It's true, right? Some people are invested in that inequality, right? And it's going to be difficult to change their mind, right? What do you think, though? Do we want a society? Do we want everything to be perfectly equal?
Or really what?
Yeah. Are there any sports fans here? Yeah. What do you watch? Soccer. Okay. Now, when you watch a soccer game, when you watch a football game, do you want to see the best players in the world, or do you want to see a bunch of average players? You want to see the best, right? Because a bunch of average players is just not that exciting, right? If you want to see average, you can just watch your friends play, in the field on the weekend, right? We want to watch the best of the best, right? We want to see, if we watch, who's your team?
Barcelona.
Okay, so if you watch Barcelona, you want to see the best players on Barcelona, and you want to see them play to their best, right? You don't want to see average, right? And that's kind of one instance in where you would only want the best players to be on your team. You don't want perfect equality there, right? You don't want to say, okay, we're going to just draw names out of a hat, and then that's who's on Barcelona, right? It'll be horrifying, right? You'll be crying while you watch your game, right? So sometimes we don't really want that perfect equality because some people are really good at things, right? And we want those people, right? If I go in and have a heart transplant, I don't want I don't want any random person, right? I don't want, oh, okay, Mir's going to do it, right? It's Mir's turn to do heart transplants today. We don't want to do that, right? Sorry, maybe you're a very talented heart surgeon, but I'm guessing not. Yeah, we don't want that, right? We want the best of the best doing those things, right? So people aren't all ever going to be equal, right? We're all a little different. We all have certain talents and skills and gifts and abilities, and we kind of want to use those abilities where they're best suited, right? I'm a horrible soccer player, right? You don't want me on Barcelona, right? I guarantee you. And Barcelona doesn't either, right? And that's fine, right? I'm probably not a great heart surgeon. Well, probably not. I'm not a great heart surgeon either. I have no training. My hands are not super steady. I can handle a little bit of blood, but I don't want to cut anybody open. Thank you very much. I'm not suited for that, right? And so, we don't want a situation where everything is so perfectly equal that we're not using people's abilities, right? Sometimes we want the best people in the best positions, right? And maybe it's not fair that I don't get to play for Barcelona, right? Because maybe I want to. But on the other hand, maybe it's fair that I don't, right? I'm not the best player, right? I'm not the best heart surgeon. I shouldn't be operating on people, right? So, yeah, we're probably always going to be in a situation where we have inequality in society because we're all different and we all have different talents. And as a society, we kind of want to use those talents, right? I want the best players on Barcelona, right? I want the best doctors in hospitals. That's good for everybody, right? But that also means that there's some inequality, right? Some people are not going to get to do what they want to do, right? It might be my dream to play for Barcelona, but if I'm a crummy soccer player, it's not happening, right? So as a society, we're probably always going to have some inequality, and that's okay, right? The question is, how much do we want, right? And how do we decide that inequality, right? For Barcelona, there's inequality, right? If you want to be on the team, you've got to be the best of the best. There's a lot of football players around the world, millions, I'm sure. You've got to be the best of the best, right? And so, yeah, that's how they discriminate, right? And so they've decided that to be on Barcelona, it's not about race. Well, it is about gender, right? It is about gender. It's not about race or religion or anything else. It's about ability, right? If you can play with the best of the best, you can be on the team, right? So as a society, we have to kind of figure out how much inequality we want and how that inequality is kind of practiced, right? How we divide things up. And so yes, we do want to spread opportunities and resources as equally as possible, but we're going to have to make some decisions about who gets what, right? Who gets to go to medical school and become a heart surgeon, right? Who gets to play for Barcelona, right? We have to make those decisions. And again, if we believe in social justice, we're going to want to reduce those inequalities that are unjustified as much as possible, right? Is it fair that I don't get to play for Barcelona because I'm a crummy soccer player? Yeah, I think that's kind of fair, right? Is it, would it be fair that I wouldn't get to play for Barcelona because I'm white? That doesn't seem entirely fair, right? Although it's not a rule, of course, but that wouldn't seem fair to people who believe in social justice, right? So we have to kind of decide what we want, right? How much inequality do we want in society, and why does that inequality exist, right? Does it exist because of race or gender or sexual orientation or religion, or does it exist because of talents and abilities, right? We have to pay attention to those. Now, why should we care about this? Well, this is a pretty complicated question to answer, right? And again, if you pay attention to the news, if you pay attention to social media, you'll see people are arguing about all kinds of stuff about race, about gender, about sexuality, about people who are transgender, about religious oppression, about people who are super rich and have tons and tons of money. People are arguing about all these kinds of things, right? And it's kind of it's a difficult thing to talk about because number one, I think there's a lot of misinformation and people misunderstand things, but also because of the reasons I have here, right? Our understanding of social justice and inequality is based on our idea about how the world works, right? How does the world work? What's normal and what's not normal? What's fair and not fair? How should things be, right? How does the world work, right? We all have kind of ideas about those things in our head, right? And they've come to us through our upbringing, our culture. Our parents have taught us things. Our friends have taught us things. Our media has taught us things, right? We've learned all these things and we have an idea about how the world works. And that kind of informs how we see the world. Okay? We'll dig into that a little bit more later, but we're just starting here, right? Ideologies. We'll talk about ideologies a bunch of times in this course, and these are kind of big ideas in your society or in your culture and in my culture that are very difficult to not believe, right? We believe that they are kind of naturally true, almost like a law of the universe, right? One we'll talk about quite a bit is the idea of meritocracy. Has anyone ever heard that word before? Big fancy word. Meritocracy. If you live in a meritocracy, you live in a society where rewards and success come through hard work. Okay? If you want to be successful, you need to work hard. The harder you work, the more successful you will be. All the people who are successful because they've worked really hard. Now, that's a big ideology, right? And you'll find evidence of it all the way through society in all kinds of different places. But I ask you, is that true? If you work hard, you will be successful. The people who are successful have worked really hard. If you're not successful, you're not working hard enough. Is that true?
To some extent.
To some extent? Okay. What do you mean?
I don't think it's so true because I think it's like if you work smart, the smarter you work, the more rich you get, the more successful you get.
Okay. So
you have to work hard.
Yeah.
But like hard work comes in with like how smart work you are.
Right. So hard work is part of it, but also you can't just tire yourself out all day, right? That's not going to work, right? You need to actually, have a plan, right? Focus on certain things, sure. What else do you think? Is there a direct relationship between hard work and success? Is everyone who is successful, have they just worked insanely hard? No?
Smart.
Like they are smart?
Yeah.
Okay.
They have some sort of idea.
Okay. Okay, so let's just say that so maybe some people like Elon Musk, for instance,
Yeah.
billions of dollars, right? Ridiculously rich guy. I'm sure he's worked hard, but he's also pretty smart in a particular way, right? And he's smart in a way that not all of us are, right? I am not as smart as Elon Musk. Very close. But not quite, right? So Elon has something that a lot of people don't have, right? His brain works in a certain way, and whether you want to say he's very, very smart, or maybe he's very creative, or maybe he just sees things in a way that other people just don't see them, whatever it is, he's got something, right? There's something special about him. whatever it is, right? So, okay, why else are people who are super successful, have they always worked the hardest?
Could you repeat the question, please?
What's that?
Could you repeat the question, please?
You're confused with the question? Yeah, so is the only, if you're going to be successful, is the only variable hard work? Or are there more variables in that equation? What do you need to be successful? Smart, right? Is everybody equally smart?
No.
No, they're not, right? Some people very clever. Some people, yeah, maybe a little less so, right?
Maybe corruption plays a huge role.
Maybe what?
Corruption.
Corruption?
Yeah.
Okay, give me a little bit more there.
Not one person can pay for something.
Ah.
And like in politics, in government, some people are corrupt, and that's why they're politicians.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's a good point, because let me take both sides of that then. So corruption, right? Some people in politics, they can be bribed, right? They can be bought. If you give them money, they'll do certain things for you. But the other side of it is that some people actually have the money to do that, right? And again, if you live in a country or if you live in a place where corruption is happening, then if you have money, you can get your things taken care of, right? You can get certain advantages. You can, did I say something funny or?
No, it's just I'm from Kenya, so
Yeah.
and it's pretty corrupt.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like if you're rich, you can get anything.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
or if you just have like a little bit of money, just bribe anyone.
Right. So there's hard work, right? There's brains, but there's also, but money's a piece of the puzzle too, right? And in Kenya, maybe there and in other places too, you use your money to kind of either get an unfair advantage or to just get things to work as they probably should, right? But people don't want to do anything unless you, right? So yeah, so the money kind of helps you become successful, right? And even in sort of countries that are less corrupt or not corrupt, that's still the case, right? People with money have advantages that other people don't, right? Look at Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump became president of the United States. He's supposed to be a billionaire, blah, blah, blah. I don't know how rich he is, but once we see his tax returns, maybe we'll know. But if you know anything, do you know anything about his backstory, about his when he was young and where he comes from? Donald Trump? So Donald Trump was born into a very wealthy family. So his father had a real estate business. That real estate business was worth a lot of money. And when his father died, Donald Trump became the head of that company. And that company was worth billions of dollars already. So Donald Trump was a millionaire when he was still in diapers. Okay? He came from a very wealthy family. He went to a bunch of fancy private schools. He went to, I think, Wharton School of Business, which is a private business university. I think it's about $40,000 a term in tuition, give or take. So did he have a lot of advantages?
Yeah.
Yes, he did, right? When he started out in his real estate career, his father funneled him a few million to get started, right? Do you think that helped him out? I think it did, right? So he kind of, to use a baseball metaphor, you guys know how baseball works, right? Some people say, that he was born on third base, right? So it's a short run home, right? So again, was Donald Trump successful? Seems to be, right? Very wealthy. Society perceives him as successful. He's president of the United States. It's a pretty big deal, right? But he had a lot of advantages that other people didn't have, right? He started out very wealthy. He went to all the best schools. He inherited a company worth billions. His father financed his early real estate career with several $1 million, right? So did he work hard? I don't know, maybe, right? Did he have a lot of advantages going in? Yes, he did, right? And so, again, this idea, I know I've gone off on a bit of a tangent here, but this is that idea of meritocracy. Is hard work the only variable in success? No, it's not, right? You do have to work hard. If you're going to become that heart surgeon, it's not going to be easy, right? If you're going to become one of the best soccer players in the world and play for Barcelona, that's not going to be easy either, right? That's going to be a lot of training and a lot of hard work. But it's not the only variable, right? Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent. Our values and morals, what we think is right or wrong, often kind of color our perception of social justice issues, right? And our morality comes from our parents, from our culture, from our religion, right? Who we are as social people. We'll talk about this in a minute. This is a fancy word here, positionality. It's not a real word, it's just kind of made up, but our identity has a lot to do with it, but we'll talk about that in a second. But by the end of this course, we'll kind of see how all of these things make it complicated to talk about social issues, right? And make it sometimes a little bit confusing to know where to stand, okay? But we'll come to that. Now, to kind of understand what we'll talk about in this class, there's a couple things that I want to sort of present to you here, okay? We're going to be taking what's called a critical approach to social justice, okay? And when we look at things critically, we're kind of pulling them apart, right? We're going to pull them apart, we're going to look at them carefully, and we're going to try to understand how they work, okay? So for instance, if we were going to take a critical approach to religion, okay, we would basically assume that God or the supernatural powers do not exist, and we would look at religion as something that humans had, something that humans had created, okay? So why did humans create religion? What is it for? Who benefits from people believing in a certain religion and who is disadvantaged? That would be a critical approach to religion, right? We would look at it as something that humans create and try to figure out how it works and who it benefits, okay? And when we take a critical approach to social justice, we'll be doing the same thing, right? We'll be looking at race and religion and gender and sexuality, and we'll be looking at how those work and how they kind of advantage some people and disadvantage others, okay? We'll be looking at the world with the assumption that it is stratified, okay? So it is divided and it's unequal. A strata is a Greek word for a layer, right? And I think we probably all get this already, that society has levels to it, right? There's some people on the bottom with not a lot of power and not a lot of money. And then there's some people on the top that have seemingly all the money and all the power. And then there's a bunch of us people somewhere in the middle, right? I think we all kind of know that that's the case, right? I want us to talk about or understand that our perceptions of the world are not all the same. I'll talk about that in a minute. And finally, I want to talk about the idea that sometimes knowledge is counterintuitive, okay? That's kind of a fancy word, but I'll get to that in a second. Let me explain some of these in a little bit more detail, okay? So, critical stance. We're operating from the idea that knowledge, things that we know, are socially constructed, okay? Now, humans are very interesting creatures. Sorry, my background is in anthropology here, so here comes the anthropology. Knowledge is socially constructed. Okay, so a lot of the things that humans, how can I say this best? A lot of the things that are real for humans are only real because we give them meaning. Okay? They don't really exist in the same way that this table exists or this travel mug exists. They're kind of imaginary, right? But because we give them meaning, they have effect, right? They do things. They have power, right? Money is like that, is it not? If I pulled out a $20 bill, and I can't because who carries money anymore, right? But if I pull out a $20 bill and I asked you, how much is this $20 bill worth? What would you say? It's worth $20, right? Duh. It's worth $20. Exactly. Why is it worth $20? In Canada, it's a piece of plastic, right? Those plastic bills that nobody likes because they don't fold and they're a pain in the butt. Why is it worth $20? You can't do anything with it. You can't eat it. You can't do anything with that plastic. The plastic is worthless, right? It's only worth $20 because we all agree that it is, right? We all say that, yes, this is $20, right? If I give a person in a store a $20 bill, they will give me $20 worth of product, right? They recognize it as $20 too. If I bring it to the bank and say, put this into my account, they'll put $20 into my account because they recognize it as $20. We all agree that that's what this thing is. It's $20, right? But again, the bill has no real value. It only has value because we say it does, right? And so many things around us are socially constructed, right? They have power and meaning because we say that they do, right? Lots of things that we'll talk about in this class that are socially constructed are the kind of social rules that we all follow, right? So for instance, I got up this morning, obviously I chose to wear this. I didn't choose to wear a dress, right? I did not choose to wear a dress. Now, it's not exactly dress weather out there, right? I'm not gonna wear a nice flowing flowery dress, but why else did I not wear a dress this morning? Yeah, my gender, right? We have gender rules, right? And for the most part, men don't wear dresses, right? Again, there's exceptions and we'll get to it, but the basic rule is that men don't wear dresses, right? So when I went into the closet this morning, I did not choose to wear a dress because there are no dresses in my closet because I'm a man and men don't wear dresses. Is there any reason why I couldn't? No, I could wear one. It is physically possible for me to wear one. People might have different reactions if they saw me wearing a dress, but I could do it, right? But again, we have this socially constructed idea of what gender is, right? We have an idea of what a man is supposed to be, and part of that is how a man is supposed to dress, right? And wearing a dress is not part of that, right? And so, again, social constructions sometimes have to do with things like money or companies. Sometimes they have to do with sets of rules or roles or ways we're supposed to behave, okay? And so those things are very important, right? They can change over time, but sometimes they stay the same. And again, because everybody agrees to them, they have very powerful consequences, right? The fact that we all agree that our money has value, that's a big deal, right? Our economy actually works, right? Billions of dollars are changing hands all the time, every day, because we all agree that, yes, this money has value, right? Because we've all agreed on that, it has a lot of power, right? Because we've mostly agreed that men don't wear dresses, no men do, right? And most men would feel very uncomfortable wearing one, right? I know there's nothing wrong with wearing one, but I would feel really weird. I'm sorry to say, but I would. I would feel very awkward and weird wearing a dress, right? And again, those ideas have power because for the most part we all believe them. Right? And again, we'll come to the dress thing later. Maybe it's not a perfect example here. I won't spend too much time on this. Society is stratified. I think we get this, right? I think we pretty clearly get that some people are on the bottom, some people are on the top, and kind of what separates you out usually is your amount of money and power, right? How much money you have and how much ability you have to kind of just do whatever you want, right? And some of us have more power, some of us have less. Okay. The other piece of this puzzle is that our perceptions of the world are not all the same. So I want to ask you here about identity, okay? So identity, if you looked it up in the dictionary, and I did, it would say something like the fact of being who or what a person or a thing is, or the characteristics that define what a person or a thing is, right? So we all have an identity, right? We all have things about us that make us us and make us different from other people, right? So what I would like to do is just do a very short little exercise here about identity. Who are you? Okay, it's the most difficult question to answer. Take a couple minutes and just jot down for yourself as many characteristics of you as you can think of, okay? Descriptive words that describe your identity. Who are you? What are you like? If you asked somebody to describe you, someone who knows you, what would they say? Okay? Just take 2 minutes, jot down. I know this is not easy because we're not really asked to describe ourselves very often, but come up with as many little adjectives as you can, right? What words describe you? Just 30 more seconds. Okay. So for online people, if you want to just type them into the live chat, that would be great. That would be very helpful. And I see Adon has already started, so that's great. Thank you. For those of you in class, shout them out. What did you come up with? You can say whatever you want. I promise I won't contradict you. Courageous and ambitious. Very good. All right. Courageous and ambitious. Good. What else?
Male.
You're male. Okay, good. What else?
Introvert.
You're an introvert. Okay, good. Me too.
Emotional.
Emotional. Okay. Awesome. What else? Adon here is a human being, which I'm very glad to hear. Although I know he is. And yeah, he's got some hobbies here, right? Likes to take pictures and watch movies. Okay, so that's something about him. What else? Give me more. Give me more.
Vietnamese.
What's that?
Vietnamese.
You're Vietnamese? Okay, good. What else? What? Indonesian? What else? Give me something, anything. Are any people in here funny? Anybody have a good sense of humor? No? You're all boring, unfunny people? I don't believe that. What else?
Interested in sport.
You're interested? Okay, sports fan. Cool. Another sports fan. What else?
Keen on fashion stuff.
Say that one more time.
I keen on fashion.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So interested in fashion, right? Right. Okay. Good. Good. What else?
Oblivious somehow.
Oblivious, sometimes. Yeah, me too. Me too. So sometimes oblivious, right? Sometimes not noticing things that are kind of right in front of our face. Yeah, me too. What else?
Not like game.
Yeah. Okay. So playful, maybe. Can I say that? That might be a little bit too much, but yeah, playful, right? We can all be playful sometimes. That's good. What else? I know this is a little difficult, but give me like three more. Anything. I won't contradict you. If you say you're funny, I won't be like, no, you're not. That'd be the worst, wouldn't it? I'm funny. No. Is anybody friendly? Okay, people are friendly, good. Is anyone maybe a good listener? Good listener, maybe. Sometimes we are and sometimes we aren't, right? But good listener. Is anyone lazy sometimes? Yeah, lazy sometimes too. What else? What else can we say? Okay, well let's go with that. Okay, that's not the longest list I've ever seen, but it's enough. Okay, so we had courageous, and we had, some of us are courageous, some of us we have different hobbies. We have sometimes we're friendly, sometimes we're good listeners, sometimes we're playful and funny. Sometimes we might be grouchy and easily annoyed, right? So all these characteristics that can describe our personal identity, right? And those are all great. The only things I want to point out to you, there's two things. One of them is just for fun. When we were talking about social environment before, it's interesting how many of that list, and maybe you didn't share them all with me, but if you look at the list, or if you look at the things you were thinking about, how many of those things can you really only be in the company of other people, right? Can you be funny if you're all by yourself? Well, maybe you can laugh at yourself, right? But you can't really be funny unless there's other people there to laugh with you, right? Can you be a good listener if you're alone? Not really, right? Can you be a good caring friend if you're alone? No, right? You can be an introvert if you're alone. That works really well. But for a lot of these things, you kind of need other people. It's interesting how you need other people to be you, right? You need other people to be yourself, because so many of our personal characteristics kind of exist in relation to other people, right? Are you playful? Are you funny? Are you caring? Are you a good listener, right? Are you loving? right? Are you easily annoyed, right? Are you grouchy, right? Often those things, not always, but often they require other people around you, right? We can only really be who we are in the context of others, which is interesting. The second thing, though, I want to point out, and actually, but it happened today a lot more than it usually does, is that you indicated group memberships, which often we're not really trained to do, right? So Mir kind of said, well, I'm male, right? And yes, that's good, right? That's a Would you say that your gender is kind of a big part of your identity? Whether you're male or female, man or woman? I think it is, right? I think it's a big part of who you are. Your gender is determines a lot of things about you, right? How you dress, how you act, usually the kind of things you're interested in, but not always, right? Gender is kind of a big deal, right? Some of us also mentioned our nationality, right? Or our ethnicity, Vietnamese, Indonesian, right? That's a piece of the puzzle as well. But it's much less common for us to think about ourselves in that way, right? And so, for the most part, again, I'm sure you didn't share everything with me, but when I first asked you that question, I'm sure you were thinking about your personal characteristics, right? I'm sure you were thinking about, oh, I'm smart and funny and courageous and, playful and, everybody thinks I'm so cool. I'm sure you were thinking about all those things, and I'm sure they're all true, but most of us didn't think about the fact that what social groups do I belong to? Right? We're not really trained to see ourselves that way. And so the reason I kind of ask you to do this is because for the purpose of this class, we are paying attention to group memberships, right? We are kind of thinking about people in terms of what groups they belong to. Are they kind of unique individuals with all those personal characteristics? Absolutely they are, right? But when we're talking about social inequalities, people's group memberships have an important role to play, right? And maybe they shouldn't, right? Maybe whether you are male or female or black or white or Indonesian or Muslim or Catholic or whatever, maybe that should have no bearing on social inequality, but unfortunately it kind of does, right? And so we do have to pay attention to those things because they do make a difference, right? And so this is where I'm going to introduce this idea of positionality. But first, I'm going to give you a bit of a break because we've been going hard at this for 50 minutes or so. So I'll give you a 10-minute break here, and then when we come back, we'll talk about this idea of positionality, okay? Oops, that's not the one. Where There we go. Okay. Hello. We are officially back. So, I asked you about your identity. You told me a bunch of things. Again, those things were very interesting, and of course, some of them have to do with our social identity, right? Who we are in the context of other people. But some of those things had to do with our group memberships, right? And so that's one of the things I want us to pay attention to a little bit more in this class, right? Should we pay attention to people and their individual characteristics? Absolutely, right? Those things are what make people interesting and fun to hang around with, and what make people our friends, and what makes us love certain other people, right? Those personal characteristics are really important. But for this class, we also want to pay attention to social group membership, because that determines our positionality, okay? So this is a fancy pants word here, positionality, but what it means is that your group memberships, the sort of social groups you belong to, do have an impact on how you see the world, okay? So where you stand in society kind of determines what you see, okay? So as kind of a practical example of this, we're all sitting in this room, yes? Some of us are sitting in this room. Some of us are sitting in other rooms because they're tuning in from home, right? So Anna's tuning in from home, right? And Cleo is, and Adon is, right? So here we are, we're having this class, right? Social justice, having this class here. And yet, we're all having kind of a slightly different experience, right? I'm kind of sitting up here, and so I have a certain perspective, right? I can see certain things, but there's other things I can't really see, right? And similarly, you guys are sitting out there, and you're all sitting in different locations, and you're having a different experience of this class than I am, right? In part, just because you're sitting in a different place, right? You can see different things. If you're at home online, this is all you can see, right? The people online, all they can see is what's on the screen here and my little bubble head, right? Which actually I can move around. Woo! Sorry. If you can't play with technology, then what's the point of it, right? We all kind of have a different perception of what's going on here, right? I might be up here thinking, wow, this is a really interesting class. Everybody out there might be saying, gosh, this is so boring. But we're all having kind of a different experience. We see different things based on who we are and where we sit, right? If I'm sitting here at the front of the room, is there a whiteboard in this room? Is there a whiteboard in this room? That's a whiteboard. Yeah? I don't see it. Right? You all see something that I don't see, right? Because of perspective, right? And again, I can see things that you can't see because of where I'm sitting, right? So this is kind of this is a little bit of a duh, that's obvious kind of thing. But in a more kind of abstract sense, this works in society as well, right? Who you are in society determines in part, determines your perspective. It determines what you see and what you don't, okay? And so, for instance, if you woke up tomorrow, okay? So this is kind of like, this is a movie setup, right? This could be a movie. I'm going to develop it for Netflix or Prime, maybe. If you woke up tomorrow morning and you were Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, okay? So you got up, you're like, oh man, I'm so tired. And you look in your bathroom mirror and oh my God, you're Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Or, if you prefer, you wake up and you look in the mirror and oh my God, you're Rihanna, right? Now, if you get dressed and you go walking down the street looking like either of these two people, are people going to treat you the same as they normally do? No, they're not, right? You're going to be swarmed by people. People are going to be asking you for autographs. People are going to want to take a selfie with you. People are going to be, hey, people are going to be saying things. You're going to have a totally different experience walking down the street as those people as you normally do. Or maybe not. Maybe you're kind of a bigger celebrity than I take you for. But still, there's a big difference, right? Walking down the street as The Rock, or walking down the street as Rihanna, that's a very different experience than walking down the street as one of us, right? And now, that's a really extreme example, but it also kind of works in a more everyday way as well. Is it the same thing? Is it the same experience for a man to walk down a street as a woman to walk down a street? Not entirely, right? Most of it's the same, right? Things look the same and smell the same. But is it exactly the same thing, right? Is it the same thing? If I walk down the street downtown as me, are people going to treat me exactly the same if I were a woman, right? Or if I were a woman of color? Or maybe if I was a Muslim woman wearing a hijab, right? Or maybe I was a Sikh man with a turban, right? Maybe I'm an old man with a cane, right? Or maybe I'm a young child running around yelling and screaming and carrying on as kids do, right? Society treats us different based on who we are, right? Whether we're old or young, male or female, different races, different religions, we do treat people differently, right? And again, some of that is probably justified, right? We don't treat adults the same way as we treat kids. And that makes sense, right? Kids are kids. They need to be dealt with differently, right? We don't treat police officers the same way as we treat everyone else, or at least I hope not, right? So positionality has to do with two things. It has to do with how you see the world, right? And you will see it a little bit differently depending on the social groups you belong to. And also the world will treat you differently as well, right? So in my little Rock/Rihanna example here, the world is going to treat you very differently if you look like those two people, right? People are going to respond to you differently. Even if you just look like The Rock, but it's really you inside, walking down the street might feel the same as it always does. Well, you'll be higher up, of course, because he's gigantic. But it'll feel the same, but people will respond to you differently. Okay, so your positionality is based on the social groups you belong to, and it affects how you see the world, and it affects how the world responds to you, right? And so these are kind of the things that we're paying attention to, right? People's gender, that makes a difference, right? We do treat men and women differently, right? Whether it's justified or not is another question, but we do treat men and women differently. Do we treat people of different ages differently? Sure we do, right? Little kids we interact with one way, people our own age we interact with in a certain way, old people we interact with them in a slightly different way. Yeah, we do that all the time, right? Appearance, definitely, right? Well, this isn't a good example because all of us in this room are incredibly good looking, so it's hard to make an example out of this, but people who are very good looking tend to get treated better, right? People tend to be nicer to them, right? The hotter you are, the nicer people are to you, usually, not all the time. But as I say, you probably all know that because we're all 10s in this room, right? So, yeah. Race. Sometimes people treat each other differently because of the race they belong to. Again, I'm not saying that's right or that they should, but sometimes they do. Ethnicity, the same thing. Religious affiliation. Yeah, particularly if you belong to a religion that is kind of easily identifiable, right? So many religions don't wear anything that's kind of symbolic of their religion, and so you can't tell, right? But some do, right? Some wear certain types of things on their head, sometimes certain types of jewelry, and that kind of marks them as belonging to a religion, right? So people can treat them differently. Mental and physical ability, for sure. Sometimes people with physical disabilities get treated differently if they're in a wheelchair, right? Not saying they should, but sometimes they do. Definitely if they have a mental disability, often people treat them differently. Social or economic class. People who are super rich and people who are super poor do not get treated the same way, right? And sometimes, depending what country you're in, nationality or citizenship status or language ability, that can also change how people interact with you as well, right? So all of these kind of social groups is what we're paying attention to in this class, okay? And again, I'm not saying that that's the only thing to pay attention to. I'm not even saying that it's the most important thing about people, but when you're looking at social inequality, yeah, you need to pay attention to these things, okay? And this is what's kind of tricky, is that for the most part, I think we're taught or we're encouraged not to see these differences, right? We're encouraged to say that, we shouldn't see color, right? We shouldn't treat people differently, right? And it's very common for people to say, well, no, I treat everybody the same, right? Have you ever said that? I've said it. Have you ever said it? I treat everybody the same? You can admit it, it's okay. But you don't, do you? Right? You don't treat your friends the same way as your grandparents, right? You don't treat kids the same way as you treat your friends, right? You don't treat your friends the same way as you treat your enemies, right? We don't do that, right? We don't treat people the same. But in this case, we've been taught to sort of believe that those things don't matter, and maybe they shouldn't matter, but unfortunately they do. Right? They do matter to some degree in society. And so when we're looking at social justice, we have to pay attention to those things a little bit, okay? Now, the last thing I have for you here is the idea that knowledge is sometimes counterintuitive. Counterintuitive is a fancy word, and if you want to sound smart, use it. People will be like, oh, counterintuitive. Well. It's a fancy word. It makes you sound smart. And it means that things are contrary to your intuition or contrary to common sense. It seems like the answer should be one thing, but it's not, right? What's the classic science experiment when you can go to the top of a tower, and what falls quicker, a pound of feathers or a pound of lead? And if there's no air resistance, we know they fall at the same rate, right? Gravity acts on them the same way. But it's counterintuitive. It seems like the lead should fall faster, right? It seems like the lead should be heavier, right? And so sometimes we get caught into those things like, oh, it seems like that should happen, but it doesn't, right? If you remove air resistance, things fall at the same rate. We know that. It's kind of seems like it shouldn't be true, right? Seems like it's wrong, even though we know it's right. Here's another example. What's wrong with this picture?
Flat Earth.
Flat Earth, right? Is Earth flat? No, that's ridiculous, right? Although there are some people out there who still believe that it is. They think that the whole round Earth is it's a conspiracy. It's all a hoax. Anyway, we don't need to get into that. The Earth is flat. Now, of course, quite a long time ago, people thought that was the case, right? People thought that the Earth was flat, and you can almost forgive them for it, because if you look out the window, it kind of seems flat, doesn't it? Do we perceive the world as round? Not really, right? It looks pretty flat. If I take a soccer ball and put it on the ground, it's not going to roll away, is it? To the other side of the planet. No, it's just going to sit there, right? And even if we get up, like here we're about 4 stories up, even if we look out the window here, it still looks pretty flat, right? And even if you go up to the top of Grouse Mountain, anyone been up to Grouse Mountain? Did you go? How was it?
Pretty good.
Pretty good? See the bears? Yeah, they're big, eh?
Really good.
Yeah, I'm glad they're fenced in. Even if you go to the top of Grouse Mountain, you'll see that the Earth still looks pretty flat, right? If you see were you able to get a good view?
Yeah.
Oh, good, nice. It still seems pretty flat, right? And so you could be forgiven for thinking that the Earth looks like this because we experience the world as flat. Looks flat when we look out the window. Things don't roll away, to the other side of the planet if we set them down. It seems flat, right? But again, we know that it's not, right? We know that it's not. And there are some science experiments that you can do, right? If you're observant, if you watch a ship set sail across the ocean, you won't see it forever, right? It'll start to disappear, right? You'll see it'll almost look like it'll sink, right? Because it's going around the curvature. But it's not so obvious that that's the case, right? And again, it seems ridiculous to say that, it seems ridiculous to even talk about the fact that the world is flat because we all know it not to be. We've seen pictures from space where it's quite clearly a little blue ball. But the idea that the world is round is counterintuitive, right? Because again, we experience the world as flat, right? We walk along the earth, it seems flat. We look out the window, it seems flat. Now, we're talking about this because sometimes ideas about social inequality are very similar, right? Sometimes certain things seem like they should be true, or they seem like they're true, but they're really not, okay? And so here's kind of an example of things that people say that are based on some counterintuitive ideas, okay? And again, if you've said some of these things even recently, that's okay. Don't feel bad. I've said pretty much everything on this list in the past. People should be judged by what they do, not by the color of their skin, right? True, they should. They're not, but they should, right? It's something that should be true, but it's not necessarily true. I accept people for who they are. Okay, maybe. I don't know what to say about that. I see people as individuals. Fantastic. We should, right? We should see people as individuals, but society doesn't, right? The fact that you are a male or a female, a man or a woman, that makes a difference, right? People do treat you differently based on that. Now, maybe they should or maybe they shouldn't, but they do, right? This comes up a lot. Focusing on difference divides us, right? If we ignore all the ways that we are different, then society will be a better place, right? Everybody will be happy if we just stop focusing on how we're different. What do you think? Is that true? Is it true?
It would be a better place.
Maybe. Well, that's the wisdom, right? That's the idea. But is it true? We can come back to it. My parents taught me that all people are equal. Fantastic, right? Good job, parents. That's what we want, right? And that's what human rights tells us, right? That human beings all deserve a certain level of equal treatment. But the world doesn't treat people as equals, right? Sometimes justifiably, right? Not everyone can get on to Barcelona, right? And that's probably a good thing. If you want to watch a good soccer game, then that's a good thing. Sometimes it's not a good thing, right? I always treat everybody the same. No, you don't, right? Nor should you, right? Again, little kids should be treated differently than adults, right? Old people we often respect because they're our elders, right? They get different treatment as well. Sometimes that's okay. Sometimes it's not. But we don't treat everybody the same, and we probably shouldn't. This is a little more complicated. I've been discriminated against, so I don't have any privilege, right? People who have been discriminated against can still discriminate, right? It's not, the world cannot be divided simply into bad people and good people, right? People who are victims and people who are oppressors. It doesn't quite work that easily. Let's see. I have friends from all races and we are all fine with each other. Cool, right? But that doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean that there's nothing to look at, right? I don't think race and gender make any difference as long as you work hard. We kind of talked about that a little bit earlier. It's nice that people don't think that, but unfortunately, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that some people don't think that because it's not true, right? Unfortunately, race and gender sometimes make a difference, right? Whether you work hard or not, right? And it's, again, that may not be fair, but it's true, right? It's white males who are the minority now. That's not true. Well, maybe in Indonesia, but not in but not in Canada or the U.S. Women are just as sexist as men. That's not correct, but we'll talk about that. People have opinions like these because they seem like they should be correct, right? They seem like they should be right, or they seem like something that we should be aspiring to, right? Oh, it's okay, guys. I don't see color, right? I don't see color. I just see you all as people, right? And again, we'll talk about that. Again, that's nice, right? But science kind of shows us that that's not true, right? We don't see other people just as people. We see them as people, but also we see them through a lens of the social groups they belong to, right? It is impossible for you to look at me and not, in part, see me as a man, right? You see me for who I am, right? I'm a person, I'm a teacher, I'm a Canadian, I'm all these different things, but a man is part of my identity, and you can't not see that, right? It's part of who I am. We can't take that and put that piece of my identity aside, right? And so similarly, people assume that that they can see the world a certain way, or that the world works a certain way. And again, it's nice to want to feel that way, and maybe your experience leads you to believe that, but sometimes those things aren't true, right? And we can see how they're not true by looking at some sort of higher level patterns or higher level numbers, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Yeah, and so I'm going to use the word narrative here. Sometimes this is the media, sometimes this is politics, sometimes this is movies and television shows that we watch, sometimes it's just people talking on social media, but we kind of want to believe the story that society is fair, right? And if we want to overcome injustice, all we have to do is be nicer to people, right? If racism is a problem in our society, all we need is for people to stop being so racist, right? Even though some people may not change their minds, or it might be hard to change their minds. If everyone just stopped being racist, then racism wouldn't be a problem, right? But again, it is more complicated than that, right? If it was just about being nice, this class wouldn't be called social justice. It would be called How to Be Nice 12, which I would also enjoy teaching as well. I think that'd be fun. But still, it doesn't quite work that way, right? Things are often a little more complicated than we think they are, right? And so to kind of see social injustices and to fix them, sometimes the way things work are not the way you think they do. Sometimes they're a little more complicated than simply learning to see people as people, right? And again, I think that's probably where we want to get, right? I think we want to get to a place where, you know, when you are interacting with someone, their race or gender or religion or doesn't matter, but at the moment it kind of does, right? And so again, we have to pay attention to it so we can kind of figure out what's going on, right? And figure out exactly how to fix it. And again, spoiler alert, but it's not just about people being nice to each other, right? It's not just about racists not saying racist things. That's not, there's more going on, right? It's more complicated than that, right? Again, otherwise this would just be like a class in how to be nice, which you'd all get 100 in because you're all super nice already. But okay, I'm gonna stop there. I know that's kind of a lot for day one, and it's a little bit, this is a little bit abstract, okay? So this is the worst part of the course. It gets better from here, but the theory stuff is always a little bit like, you know, a little dry. But I promise you we'll get into some more interesting stuff probably tomorrow. But it is worth looking at this stuff and introducing the idea of things that are socially constructed, things that are counterintuitive, and this idea of positionality, right? We see the world a little bit differently depending on who we are, right? And not only our individual characteristics, but also our social groups, right? The social groups we belong to. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Do you have any questions you would like to ask or things you would like to say? No? You're all good? Okay. Well, then that will be all for today. I'll let you pack it up. We'll see you tomorrow. I hope you have a nice afternoon. Stay dry because I think it's going to rain most of the day today. So, and I'll see you all tomorrow, okay? All right. See you.